A young girl was stolen from in front of her grandparents' home. The question is, would she ever be found? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Opal Jennings. Viewer discretion is advised. Real quick before we get started, of course, hello, my name is Mike. If you're new to the channel, I tell 3 true crime stories every week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing, you big crazy psychopaths just like the rest of us. It was rude. And also, I tell short-form true crime stories over on TikTok, where I'm probably more known. I have about 3 million followers over there or so. So please feel free to follow me there. The link is in the link tree in the description of this video below. It also comes up here at some point in the beginning and at the end of the video. I also sell merch. We ship all over the world. That is also linked in the link tree below. And then if there's a case you want me to cover, please just email me. My email is makingatruecrimerertwo.com. That's also below. Just email me the name of the person, where it happened, when it happened. I'll add it to my list. I can't promise you when I'll cover it because I pick my cases at random. So it will happen eventually. I just can't tell you when. Let's get into today's case. Opal Jennings was born on November 24th, 1992. And she was actually born in Clarksville, Arkansas. But by the time this story happens, she's living with her family in the Fort Worth, Texas area. But by the time she was about 6 years old, she would end up living with her grandparents in Saginaw, Texas, which isn't really too far from where, her actual parents live. And the reason why she was sent to live with her grandma was because her mom, I guess, couldn't afford to take care of Opal properly on a very minimal salary. And so she wanted to make sure Opal was, taken care of, so she would send her to the grandparents' house. Opal was only 6 years old at the time of this case, and there's really not much to say about her, unfortunately, because she wasn't given much of an opportunity to experience life. But, she was described as your typical kid. She was super happy all the time. She loved going outside and playing. She was kind of like a mix of girly girl, kind of a tomboy. She liked playing with her dolls. But she also liked going out and, roughing it, riding her bike, with the other kids and playing in the dirt. She loved to read, she loved coloring, and she had just started kindergarten that year, really soon before this, and she was loving it. But unfortunately, in March of 1999, all of that would just come to a very abrupt end. Specifically, it was March 25th, and she was outside her grandparents' home that day. She was playing with one of her cousins, Austin, and a friend of theirs named Spencer. There was, I guess, this open field or something to the grandparent, literally next to the grandparents' home. It wasn't like it was down the road or anything. That's where they were playing, and basically it was within earshot of other people, and it wasn't out of the way. And at some point, kind of in that late afternoon before dinner time, one of the kids runs back to the house and tells the grandparents, "Opal gone bye-bye." And the grandparents are like, "What do you mean?" So according to the 2 other kids, he says that a black car pulls up, a man gets out of the car, he walks up to the kids almost with a purpose, directly beeline to Opal, and he punches her in the chest. This is a 6-year-old girl who this random man walks up to and just socks her in the chest. And then he literally drags her back to his car, throws her in the car, and he takes off. He just abducted her in front of these 2 other kids. Just as brazen as could possibly be. So Spencer, one of the kids, who was only 4 years old, and her cousin, who was around the same age, they both saw the man and said he was a white guy. He had pimples on his face. He was a skinny guy, kind of younger. He was wearing a short sleeve t-shirt. He had on dark pants and he had on dark sneakers. And he was wearing a red baseball hat. Pretty vivid descriptions, but it was also described more childlike to the grandparents and eventually the police. But That's essentially kind of what they came up with after talking to both kids, is kind of that description. But once the grandparents find this out, I mean, one of them goes out to the open lot just to make sure, but the other one is calling 911 immediately. And they put out pretty much almost right away an Amber Alert. And I think at first a lot of people actually had kind of looked at this very similar to the Amber Hagerman case, which the Amber Alert is named after. But within a very short time, they have Opal's image all over the news. They have the FBI and the police are there, and they are all kind of doing this big Opal. They're doing like a grid search. They are also having people go door to door, asking anyone if they saw anything or heard anything. They put out kind of a description of what Opal was wearing that day. She had on a white t-shirt that had stripes and like a flower design on it. She had on purple shorts with like cargo pockets, white socks, and tennis shoes. Her hair was in a ponytail, and the FBI basically went into the home and they collected anything that Opal would typically either be wearing or holding when she slept, because that's how they would get a scent. Because they brought in scent dogs to see if they could pick up anything. Within days, her case is featured on America's Most Wanted. It's featured on Good Morning America. It's not just local news there in the Saginaw, Texas area. It is national news at that point. That's when the FBI starts to get, tips and information from the neighborhood saying they saw a very suspicious car kind of driving around the neighborhood slowly, almost creepily. Witnesses kind of described the vehicle very similar to what the kids described it as. They gave a little bit more detail, like it was a dark purple color. The kids initially said it just looked kind of purpley or black. The car also had tinted windows, and it had like very bright, very like looking like rims for the tires. Saginaw is a small town, at least back then, had about 12,000 people living in it. But this particular time, there was a huge NASCAR event going on, and they had an influx of people. We're talking like upwards of 300,000 people had been in the area because of this NASCAR event. And that really complicated things in terms of, oh my God, could this have been an out-of-towner? Or was this someone local? We have a lot of people to interview at this point. The first main suspect police had was actually Opal's biological father, Randy. Police had found out that Randy Crawford was essentially telling people that he planned to take Opal away. Almost like, I'm going to just take her and I'm going to take care of her. He and Opal's mom did not end on the greatest terms. They had a rocky relationship. And with Opal's grandparents essentially custody of Opal at that point, it became a big issue amongst the family. And so it kind of would give Randy sort of motive, like, I'm going to take my daughter because I want to raise my daughter kind of thing. However, they were able to very, very quickly rule Randy out because he was not even in the state. They confirmed without a shadow of a doubt he was in Nashville, Tennessee, during that entire time Opal went missing. So police start looking at local sex offenders in the area, and within like a day or so, the investigation kind of kicking into high gear, a 30-year-old man named Richard Lee Franks came onto their radar, and I can only find like one or two pictures of this guy. He was very difficult to find a photo of. I had to dig deep and find old news station clips to see if I can find anything of him. But he kind of fit the bill of what this person looked like according to the kids. He was this sort of scrawny white guy. He had pimples on his face, and he looked a lot like what they described. Well, again, he was a registered sex offender in the area. And so he kind of came up on, their list of possible suspects really early on. There were also other sex offenders that came up on their list, and they had to investigate each and every one of them. And so really it took a couple of months for, Richard Lee Franks to really kind of get narrowed down to being the actual possible guy. And that's when police were given a tip by someone that knew Richard Franks at the time and said that Based on the description the kids and the other neighbors gave of the car, this acquaintance said, well, that's actually a really similar car, or almost identical car, to what Richard was driving at that time. And they also said that Richard was known for having a ponytail, which is, again, matching the description that people gave of him, at least at that time. But by the time this comes up in terms of him really being looked at, he had already cut his hair, and so he looked kind of different. So what were his, sex offenses? Well, he had been charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault, sexual assault against a child. And he ended up pleading guilty to it and got a reduced sentence for it. And it was actually his own niece, his 8-year-old niece, he did it to. So he was out on probation, which he violated twice, and was basically, because of breaking probation, he was jailed for like a couple of months for breaking probation twice. He would also admit during all of this going on to sexually assaulting another one of his very young family members, which I don't think he got jail time for. He had to complete mental health evaluations consistently, and he had to be a part of a sex offender program. And, kind of during all of this, he also ends up getting married and, has this seemingly happy life. It also needs to be said that at this point, Opal still hasn't been found. And as a matter of fact, no trace of her has ever been found at that point. And so they didn't have any physical evidence to say, yep, Richard, or Ricky as he went by, Ricky Franks, well, we don't have anything to actually say he did it. We have eyewitnesses who describe the man. I want to say these witnesses saw him in a lineup and confirmed it was him, I'm guessing. But again, they didn't have anything to go on in terms of physical stuff. On August 17th, 1999, he would end up being arrested by police because of an outstanding traffic warrant he had. Nothing to do with the actual case. But they used this as the best opportunity to actually bring him in and interview him for questioning about the disappearance of Opal Jennings. When he's in the police station, they ask him, hey, are you willing to take a polygraph test? And also, can we search your car? He says, yeah, go ahead. I'll take the test. Go ahead, search my car. Polygraph test says he's basically lying through his teeth about every question they ask him. But again, polygraph tests are not 100% accurate. They are really more of a tool to just kind of lead into something else, into more questioning, and maybe it gets them to spill more information. But, you can't use polygraph tests in a court of law. Ricky also has a very low IQ. He was very poorly educated. He did not get the greatest education in the world. So you kind of run the risk of, questioning him. Are they coercing him? Because it happens a lot, unfortunately, with people with lower IQs. Police tend to push them into confessing. From what I understand, though, they don't really put a ton of pressure on him, and he ends up just kind of saying what he did. He confesses in a way. He says that day he actually did pick Opal up, and he took her to the store. And then he says he dropped her off at home afterwards, and he never saw her again. And he never confesses to murdering her. He never confesses to anything like that. But he has essentially confessed to kidnapping her, at least. But then he starts to say, well, police are putting words in my mouth. They've coerced me into saying this information. His wife has his back the entire time. She even tries to give him an alibi. She goes to police and literally gives him what she's calling a solid alibi. All while Ricky is still saying, but police coerced me. I didn't do this. They made me do all of this and say all of this. And well, it turns out Judy, his wife, was lying to police about the alibi. And so Judy ends up being charged essentially with perjury charges, and she basically admits it. She goes, okay, yeah, I lied. And so she ends up pleading guilty to perjury charges, and she herself gets a 5-year deferred sentence for it. So Ricky Franks is then arrested and charged with aggravated kidnapping, the kidnapping of Opal Jennings. So Franks is then essentially brought to trial. This whole time, they're still looking for Opal. He's not saying where she is, and they still haven't found her. And it's, that's the main thing here is they want Opal home. They believe that Opal is probably no longer alive, but they want her home. They want to bury her. They want to lay her to rest because she deserves that. That being said, her grandparents would go on, television, especially her grandma. Her grandma became kind of like the face of the family for Opal, and she was the one who was always interviewed and on the news and everything. And, her grandma would say that he's not saying where she is and we haven't found her, which means, of course, there's still hope. She could still be out there alive. There is that possibility, of course. You have to have hope. The grandma even goes on the Montel Williams show where he commonly had on psychic Sylvia Browne. And Sylvia Browne said this, quote, "She's not dead, but what bothers me, now I've never heard of this before, but for some reason she was taken and put into some kind of slavery thing and taken into Japan. The place is Kukauro or Kukaura," end quote. The most bizarre thing I've ever heard. She was wrong, like she was most of the time. She was incredibly wrong. There was not one single thing about what Sylvia Browne said on the Montel Williams show directly to Opal's grandma, who was in the audience, that was correct. Meanwhile, June 26, 2000, Ricky's trial begins. But it ends in a mistrial because there is a hung jury. There is a 7-5 vote. The 7 was in favor of convicting him, but there were 5 people who said not guilty. And most of his defense was centered on the fact that he was not a very intelligent person and that they were really weighing heavily on the police coerced him. So he has to go on trial a second time, and this time he is convicted. He is found guilty of the aggravated kidnapping of Opal Jennings. Apparently the jury is also able to determine that his intent was to sexually assault this young girl, given his history of sexual assault of especially children. But he's actually sentenced to life in prison. And he appeals and he appeals and he appeals, and he's always denied, and he's still continually denying he had anything to do with it, and he still won't say where Opal is. On December 20th, 2003, roughly 5 years after Opal was taken from in front of her grandparents' home, there was, I guess, 2 people on horseback near Fort North, northwest of Fort North in Texas, and they stumble across a small human skull. Near the skull, they find a pink Barbie tennis shoe, which was the exact shoe that Opal was wearing. And they only found scattered remains of this person, but they would be able to identify the remains as that of 6-year-old Opal Jennings. She was in fact deceased. Luckily, they were able to determine how she died, or likely how she died. She had a pretty severe blunt force trauma injury to her skull. And they determined that based on the severity of this crushing blow, she would have died pretty much instantly. And it likely happened within the same evening of her being abducted. This is obviously great for the family because they can lay her to rest. They have her, they brought her home, and they can lay her to rest. And Ricky Franks, at least at this point, it's now many, many years later, but he never went on trial again for her murder because there really wasn't a point. There was no point on dragging the family through another trial and going through all of that trauma again, because Ricky Franks was already sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for abducting Opal. And part of that trial was basically that he likely killed her and sexually assaulted her. So in a way, he was kind of already convicted based on the premise that kidnapped her, but he killed her. And so there was just no reason to go on trial again. And Ricky Franks will be spending the remainder of his natural, pathetic life rotting in a prison cell, hopefully dropping the soap many times. Opal Jennings was this sweet, innocent 6-year-old child. She was just starting life. She didn't get a chance to go forward with that life. We don't know what she would have become. Would she have become a mom and a grandma herself at some point? Would she have gone to college? Would she have gotten the job of her dreams? We'll never get to know because a worthless excuse for a human, decided, I'm going to take her and I'm going to do what I want with her, and I'm going to kill her. And I'm just going to throw her body like she's just trash for animals to feed off of. Her whole body wasn't even found, for God's sakes. And anyone who can do this kind of thing to anyone, but let alone a child, doesn't deserve to ever breathe free air. And these are cases where I'm like, you know what? I'm totally okay with the death penalty. He didn't get the death penalty, but it's like, he should have. Because, quite frankly, this man, he gets to live. He gets to live the rest of his life. Sure, it's secured in a prison cell, but he gets to breathe. He gets to experience life. He gets to interact with his family from time to time. He gets that freedom, you know? He gets fed every day. He gets all of this. Opal doesn't. Opal doesn't, because of him. But thankfully, he is rotting in a prison cell, and so Opal and her family got the justice they very rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case, True Crime Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. I know it's sad, but at least there was justice in this case. As usual, please subscribe to the channel. Again, I tell 3 stories a week here on YouTube, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Follow me over on TikTok, which is linked below. I sell merch. Recommend a case to me. Email is listed below. And yeah, so that is it for this video. And I'm going to end this video with my New Year's resolutions. I've written down a few things. My first New Year's resolution is to have, to not have the number 3 in my weight, preferably also at the beginning. My second New Year's resolution is to finally watch the highly recommended 2 Girls, 1 Cup. I would like to have my eyeballs waxed. I would like to visit Antarctica in only a short sleeve shirt and shorts, because I'm a man-ish. I would like to go skydiving, for sure, off a 4-foot bridge. That might be too high. That might still be too high, but we'll figure it out. I would also like to invade the compound of Santa Claus, because he did not give me anything I wanted this year. And I want to take out all of his elves, one by one, preferably with either a machete or a bow and arrow, or both. Maybe a bow and arrow that shoots machetes. And then I would like to gut Santa Claus. Yeah. He didn't give me what I wanted, so. I would like to be able to make a YouTube video where I just say the words apple cider, eating a large macaroni, crack cocaine, sitting on a duck's beak. I would also like to eat a mango for the first time. And that's it. Those are my resolutions. Okay. Hopefully I can do those. So, bye.